Let's talk about what you're doing on SiriusXM these days, because you're all over the dial over there. What's going on over at SiriusXM?
Well, actually, I've kind of pulled back a little bit, and I'm just doing stuff on the Springsteen channel, and then I'm on the Spectrum, which is channel 28, which is sort of as close as they have to the old Sirius Disorder that Meg Griffin did, which is sort of my natural home. But then when they merged with XM, some things got consolidated and some things got eliminated, and unfortunately, Disorder went down. But I was doing a political talk show on Sirius XM Progress, formerly Sirius Left, and that was a lot of fun. But it just ended up being, when I try to reshuffle my life in order to deal with the fact that when I'm 64 is here now, and Grand Parenthood along with it, that had to go. So it's gone. But I'm working on doing some other kinds of things for them. It would be more like specials. But
the show that started you off there is still on, Kick Out the Jams, which is on.
Kick Out the Jams is still there, and I just did a show with Ed Hamill on Trial, and a young novelist, Sean Madigan Hain, Hoen is how they spell it. I don't know why. Who's a Detroit guy, and he written a book called Songs Only You Know, which is a memoir of being sort of in a screaming punk band at the same time that his father became a crack addict and his sister became a suicide. So there's really kind of three kinds of suicide in one book. It's quite a memoir. So anyway, I had the two of them the other night, so we were like playing old Stooges records and just having a good time.
There you go. And that's the beauty of that show, is they let you do pretty much whatever you want, right?
I've been doing the show for 10 years, and come October, and nobody's ever told me I shouldn't do anything, including criticize SiriusXM.
and knowing you the way I know you, you wouldn't listen anyway.
I listen. I do listen. How I act is a whole other set of questions, but I do listen.
Correct. All right, it is the 50th. This is the year, the 50th anniversary of the Beatles. You've done some stuff on your show about the arrival of them in America over the last couple months, and I wanted to grab you and talk about something that you know pretty intimately, because you wrote a book about the Beatles' second album, which really is more than just about the second album. It's about the American releases in general. And it's one of the best. It's probably one of my favorite.
The war between grown-ups and teenagers, and respectable culture and not respectable culture, and commercial culture, and musicians who are beginning to see themselves as artists. It's about all of those things too. And the thing of it is that when you write about those things in the context of the Beatles, because of just who the Beatles are and what they're like, it comes out more, even if you're having to make fun of things or criticize things or something, it somehow ends up more positive because it's the Beatles. And the Beatles, what was the first famous thing and important thing the Beatles said? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there you go.
Well, it's all of those things that you just said, but for teenagers like I was growing up, it was our first exposure to the Beatles, and we didn't know any better that there was this whole, as you said, adult and grown-up thing going on.
Adult conspiracy against the heart of teenage youth at a moment when teenage youth was being asked a lot of questions that, the kinds of change that are going on now about the incorporation of, say, gay marriage into just a standard everyday culture. We're going on about race, about war, about the beginning of the ecology movement, other things than just black come into race, and gender politics were starting in terms of women's movement. So all of that is in those Beatles records, one way or another.
No matter how bad Capitol in America screwed it up, it was still there.
Yeah, well, see, but the thing is, you live in a system, and it's a system, right? So you have to accept that the background for everything you're going to do is going to be the system. And if you have great success, you are going to make an exorbitant amount of money. And you have to decide at what point you're going to draw the line, but at the same time you have to decide, well, the one thing I ever knew when I sold a lot of books and got paid very well for them, which I did because I have a good agent and all, and just do my business life right, is they pay me, I'm going to do more good things with it than the publisher is. That I have every confidence of, and I think the Beatles thing was sort of like that. And I think, I got no complaints with what they did with Apple Records. I got no complaints with what they did personally. Paul put himself on the line for everything. Paul McCartney's role in marijuana reform alone deserves a lot more celebration than it gets. John, in many, many other ways, including getting my friend John Sinclair out of jail, he played a significant role in that. Come to think of it, that's marijuana politics too, isn't it?
Yeah. 10 for 2.
Yeah. Well, it was a wild thing, but anyway, I just think that it's hard to appreciate. What is it now? It's half a century since they came to the United States, but it's almost 40 years since they broke up. They broke up basically in '69, right?
Yep.
So that's 45 years.
Yeah. Well, for those that are younger listeners who don't know anything about the American releases, until recently they've repackaged some of those, and we can talk about that. But most of the younger listeners would be familiar with the CD releases, which were the English releases. Can you give us the foundation of what happened in terms of the American releases and why that took place?
I can boil it down.
Okay.
It really was kind of worth the book, because what you ended up doing was explaining the difference between, first of all, you had to explain the difference between the English record business and the American record business, in terms of copyrights, in terms of royalties, in terms of the fact that, the different ways that racial attitudes played out, which isn't nearly as simple as people think it is. But the first thing was that in America, for reasons that were entirely economic, the basic number of tracks on an American album was 11 or 12, almost always 12. And in Britain, it was almost always 14. And this had to do with how song publishing royalties were calculated, believe it or not. And I'm not going to get into it. That's great in a book and too tedious for radio.
Right.
But so that's one thing. And so what happened would be the Beatles would put out a 14 song record in Great Britain. It would come over here, and this happened to pretty much every group. I think every group. Happened to Stones, happened to Who. Their 14-track album became a 12-track album. In the Beatles' case, because Capitol began to see the potential of it right away, the 14-track album became an 11-track album. And there are two reasons for that. One of which is, so that meant every second album they had 6 tracks, right?
Right.
That hadn't come out here. Plus which, for reasons that were almost peculiar to the Beatles, a lot of people think it's true of all British bands, that nobody put their singles on their albums. That's not true. But the Beatles didn't put their singles on the albums, often as not. Right? That's the reason can you imagine how much better Sgt. Pepper's would be if it had been done in a way that had Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane on the record? Seriously.
Yeah.
That changes your whole perspective on the record when you start to think about it like that. And of course now we have digitized things, and if you doubt me, you can go sequence the records with, say, the way I would do it is put Penny Lane at the beginning and put Strawberry Fields in the middle. And, not at the beginning, because the Sgt. Pepper stuff has to come, but right after a little help from my friends or something like that. And what you get is, it rocks more, it's more psychedelic at the same time. And, and it also carries through that sort of very British Liverpudlian thing that is floating around there, and it's kind of hard to process from an American point of view. But anyway, so what happens in America is those singles tracks go with the 6 tracks that are left over from the last 2 albums. You take 5 of the singles tracks, you take those 6 tracks, now you got another album that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world.
And economically, you make some more money.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, which in today's terms is tens of millions of dollars.
Right. So the first album we get in America is Meet the Beatles. And that was the one that we all remember.
Meet the Beatles is a big hit single that is not on a British album. It is a large number of tracks from their first album, and if I remember correctly, it's got a couple of things that were on the British second album too.
Yes, I think you're correct there.
You know, which is called, one of them is called Please Please Me, and one of them is called The Beatles. What is the second one called?
With the Beatles?
With the Beatles, right.
Yeah.
And but there are 2 other factors in this. First of all, Capitol Records had assigned all of its international repertoire. And this means everything from Indian classical music to German beer garden bands to English rock bands to a guy named Dave Dexter who hated rock music and was adamant and aggressive about it. And that is the reason that the first 3 or 4 singles, including She Loves You, for God's sake, Please Please Me, Do You Want to Know a Secret, all of them came out on these little, basically R&B oriented and early rock oriented, but mostly they were, VJ Records, which is a great R&B label. The only other white act I can think of that they had was they somehow wound up with 4 Seasons too. Mm-hmm. But basically, was a black record label. The Beatles' early singles end up on labels like that. Well, they have economic problems. They have distribution problems. They don't have the money to promote things the way Capitol did. And finally, Brian Epstein goes and says to the guy who ran some lord of some guy, some titled gentleman, Sir Billy Who, or whatever his name was, you're putting out the next Beatles record on Capitol Records in America. We're going to be on the Ed Sullivan Show. We just made the biggest hit that we've made so far, and you are putting the record out. And I don't know what the alternative was. Probably the alternative was that they wouldn't deliver a record at all to any part of the company unless EMI agreed to do that. EMI owned Capitol in the U.S. So now they have to put them out. Dave Dexter is still in charge. It's Dave Dexter who decides what tracks to leave off Rubber Soul and With the Beatles to make the second album, to make eventually, all the kind of records that, trying to remember, was Beatles 65 a record in Britain?
No, it wasn't.
Sure of any of it. Yeah, and Beatles 6 wasn't a record in Britain.
Something New?
Yesterday and Today wasn't an album.
Right. Something New?
Something New wasn't an album.
And the early Beatles was basically the VJ release, which actually predates Meet the Beatles, introducing the Beatles.
Kind of, it's the VJ release. It's what it is it's all the things that didn't come out on Capitol and had been licensed to these other companies.
Right.
Capitol took them back. In the case of the stuff they'd licensed to VJ, they unquestionably took them back illegally. But VJ, which was having economic problems for other reasons, was in no position to fight them, so they just bullied their way into it. They stole them back, basically. And so all of this is in there, but the final thing about these releases is that Dave Dexter deliberately messed up the sound. What these records sounded like. He wanted them to sound like crap, and he made them sound like crap. And how he did it is fascinating because he was getting, basically, he had to go in and deliberately sabotage the mastering of the record. He wasn't getting, 2-inch tape that he could remix. But he could go in just in the mastering process and what little he could do with the 2-track that George Martin did send him and screw things up completely. Now, there's the Beatles. It was, in fact, impervious to being screwed up. Nevertheless, I mean, meaning that the music stayed great, even though he did his damnedest to make it not great.
Right.
Now, where this all comes out, and the proof of the pudding really is, when John died, Dave Dexter was working for Billboard magazine. And he wrote, actually, you have to imagine, John Lennon's died is a national trauma. It's an international, it's a worldwide trauma. And this asshole, writes a hostile obituary in Billboard magazine. You know, just a character assault, a musical assault. It was one of the most offensive things I've ever read about anything. And the upshot of that was the end of Dave Dexter's career, because David Geffen organized, who, you know, had put out John's last solo album, organized a advertising boycott. That was the end of Dave Dexter at Billboard magazine, which basically exists to print charts and sell advertising.
Yeah.
So you know, that's the whole thing. But it isn't quite, because in some way all of these things are about the kinds of conflicts that there were over many different kinds of things in the 1960s. You know, the Beatles are expressly and assertively bringing black music to white kids. The Beatles are talking about sex and drugs. The Beatles are advocating this seemingly simple music as something that's an art form. The Beatles are making a fortune for the music industry, which was stupid enough not to thank them for many years, by changing the sales platform from the 45 single to the album, the much, 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 much more profitable album, you know, which made them billions of dollars until they were stupid enough yet again in the, you know, last 15 years to let Steve Jobs turn it back into a singles market.
No, you're right.
But, you know,
yeah.
So all of that is tied up in the Beatles. But for me, and what I really learned, it's what I learn every time I get anywhere near those guys. I mean, I did an interview with Paul for SiriusXM a few months ago, and quite honestly, you know, what you're, and he's got that one great song about, you know, taking the bus to school, and he's got the other great song about, you know, early days, about what it was like to be in the Beatles and how nobody can know who wasn't there, which brings you closer to knowing than you could be, except if you were there. You know, every time you get around these guys, there's something that expands your horizons and affirms the fact that life is a good thing. I mean, I don't know any less corny way to put it.
Yeah. And back to the original point, despite Dave Dexter's attempts to sabotage the albums, sometimes he really got it right, and that's sort of the crux of the second album book that you wrote, right?
Well, the only reason he got it right was because it was impossible to get it wrong.
But I mean, the sequencing.
If you take, okay, so here's the Beatles' second album, okay? It's got one Paul lead vocal. It's got one George lead vocal. I can't think, I don't even think there is a Ringo lead vocal on it. Maybe I'm forgetting something. You know, so it's mostly a John Lennon record, which is ironic because of them all, the one that Dave Dexter hated the most was John. First of all, he hated the harmonica, the way John played it, which is enormously amusing, especially because that was John's first instrument. It was an instrument that a lot of people in John's family had played. I mean, you read Mark Lewison's book, and that kind of jumps out at you. And boy, if you haven't read Mark Lewison's book, it looks like 1,000 pages of drudgery. It might be the best rock biography I've ever read. And everybody's having trouble with the length of it. I saw Jeff Jones the other night, who runs Apple Records for the Beatles now. He's an old friend of mine. And I said, have you read this book? And he said, no, it's too much. And I said, no, it's not too much. It's everything, and therefore it's what we want. It's what we need.
And it's just volume 1.
Have you read any of this stuff?
No, I haven't yet, but I've got the book right in front of me right now, in fact, and
it's too much information to swallow all at once. It's going to take me a long time to read it, but I read some of it every day.
Wow.
Every day, and I will until I finish the whole 1,000 pages, and then by that time I'm hoping that he'll have a second volume out.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be.
I'd like to live to see the end of this.
Well, I think he'd like to live to see the end of it.
And he's further. We know for certain that he's further along than we are. I mean, that's just how it works. But
right.
Somebody should build a statue of him in Liverpool. I'm serious. This guy will never, ever, ever get enough credit. Things pull you in and out of their orbit, right? I mean, you get very busy with other things, or I don't know. Lately I've been listening to Teddy Pendergrass and Gene Pitney. I mean, it's kind of and Sarah McLachlan. I mean, it's like you get pulled into these other things,
sure,
right?
Of course.
And then you come back, and eventually you bump into the Beatles again. And it's almost like somebody has cleaned the watch and made sure that it's still running on the right time. And that was, and for me, this time the pull was not Mark's book, Lewison's book, but the interview with Paul, which was, and that record, which I actually thought was one of the best things he's ever done. But certainly, to me, I'll tell you how good I think it is. I thought it was like a Wings record. And that's how hard. I loved Wings. Do you want to know the weirdest thing about the Beatles? Because I met tons of people around them. I never met George. Ringo, I kind of know semi-socially, not terribly well. John, I knew in all sorts of different ways because he was a New Yorker, and so was I at that point, right. Towards the end of his life. And Paul, I just, kind of similar with Paul, I kind of bump into him, and then we'll do something together professionally or whatever. I can never tell whether he remembers me or not, and I don't care because he's Paul McCartney. But the thing about, and then you talk to this guy or that guy, or who this guy who used to be one of their lawyers, or this guy who used to work in Brian's management company, or this guy who used to hang with him in Liverpool. This woman who used to run their fan club, and she was fabulous. No assholes. But the only thing I can tell you about, this is like my thing about the Beatles, is I keep waiting to meet one.
Oh.
Ain't going to happen. It ain't going to. It's one reason I was so happy that Jeff Jones got that job, because it meant they were just going to maintain their perfect record. I'm serious.
Right.
And crazy as it sounds, I'm dead serious about this. They had the most wonderful people around them. Smart, totally got it about what was important. It's not just how great they were; it's also how great they made the stuff around them.
Right.
And so and you see this somewhat. My friend Vivek Tiwari's done a graphic novel about Brian Epstein and his life, which is an amazing book, which happened to come out during this 50th anniversary year, but that's not really what it's about. And he's working on a film which could also be interesting. And then that got me thinking, and actually one of the things Paul and I ended up talking about off the air was the Beatles' American attorney was a guy who I knew well for other reasons later on in my life, named Nat Weiss. And Paul and I ended up having a whole conversation about Nat, who was one of Brian's best friends, who was another gay man, who could live much more openly in the United States. In fact, he and his partner adopted children in the 60s as a gay couple.
Wow.
Dig that.
Yeah.
Right? So there's all this stuff going on around them, and nobody's a jerk. How do they do that?
Yeah, exactly.
I can't do it at my house.
But we still had Dave Dexter. And if we could go back, let's go.
But Dave Dexter didn't have anything to do with the Beatles. He was his responsibility,
right?
Capitol Records, right?
Yeah,
so it doesn't mean that. I mean, if you ask me, Sid Bernstein was a jerk. All he did was promote a couple concerts,
right?
And then hound them for the rest of their lives. So that's different, right? Actually, one of the great things in my buddy Vivek's book is he's got a whole kind of internal chapter in the book. It's the one place where it sort of breaks from just looking at things, from a Liverpool / it's called The Fifth Beatles, this book.
Right.
And he's got, Kyle Baker does one chapter in it where they go to the Philippines and have a run-in.
Right.
You know about this run-in they had with Imelda Marcos?
I know some of the story.
The army after him. They had to go under armed. They had to go and basically fight their way through a battalion of army guys in order to get on a plane and leave the country because she wanted them to come to some reception at the presidential palace, and they said no. And they always said no. This is a great thing, or one of the great things, is they always said no to those kinds of things. You know why? Because when early in their career, they said yes, and they go to something like in Washington or whatever, the British Embassy, and, crazy bourgeois women would come up to them and, sneak up behind Ringo and cut out a lock of his hair.
Right.
Or, grab their hair and pull on it to make sure it was real. I mean, just insane, ugly, I know what John Lennon would say about this. What John would say about this is, and they thought we were uncivilized.
Right. It's the scene from A Hard Day's Night, except a little rougher.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, except that, and it was no joke,
Right. Yeah.
To do that to another person's body is criminal.
Yeah, exactly.
And Imelda was just one step beyond that. So it's very funny, and it's sort of Brian who has to get him out of it, which is why Vivek put it in. And then you got Kyle Baker, who's one of the great under-recognized, actually Andrew Robinson, who did the rest of the book, is too, who are both great underrated comics artists. The Fifth Beatles is really a great book, at least for me. So anyway, there is a pack of stuff. What else? What have I forgotten? I mean, what is it? What else are you thinking about this year?
What else am I thinking about? Oh, I'm thinking about
them. Yeah.
About the Hard Day's Night anniversary as well. What a groundbreaker that was. We can talk about that a little bit if you want.
Well, that thing was, conceived basically as an Elvis movie, I think. Do you know?
Yeah.
Like Jailhouse Rock or Loving You or something like that. And then again, they have this kind of instinct about who's great to work with, whether that's Brian or just the luck of the draw, or it's John and Paul and Ringo and George having great radar. I don't know what it is. They got Richard Lester.
Right.
And they got a wonderful writer. But to me, Richard Lester plus the Beatles 2 times in a row, that wasn't an accident. Right? First one might have been an accident, but no. The other thing is, and this is long forgotten, I think, is how goddamn funny they were.
And it holds up. It holds up well.
Which absolutely holds up.
Yeah.
It absolutely holds up, And it's sort of the basis for all good rock and roll humor ever since, that you just got to be lightning fast and reacting to a situation, come up with the one-liner, and just smack them with it. And all 4 of them did it all the time.
Yeah, and there's stuff in that.
All your haircut, Arthur, bang.
Right.
George, the doer one, Ringo's got one. John's got one every second question. Paul never, ever changes the expression on his face, completely deadpan, and he's a riot.
Right. My favorite scene is when John is snorting the coke on the train.
Well, he was ahead of his time always.
I'm not sure if that was Coke or Pepsi, but I got the joke. I didn't get it till 30 years later.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't even know how they knew that, because clearly they weren't doing that yet.
Right.
And you know about the meeting with Bob Dylan at the airport, right?
I know something about it.
Bob came to their hotel room, and he brought marijuana, and they'd never smoked marijuana. And he said, "What? You've never smoked marijuana?" And they said, "No." He said, "Well, what about the song? I said, what song? He said, when you touch me, I get high, I get high.
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that.
True
No.
story.
Yeah.
That's a true story.
That's funny. And then he got him high, right?
Well,
as the story goes.
He had access to things that could take him to that place without a medical prescription. Yes.
Without the card like we have here in California.
Too bad it wasn't. Too bad, yeah, right, exactly. Too bad they weren't in Colorado. I mean, the thing is so bent, and the great thing about A Hard Day's Night is it's so bent, but it's almost like they're going through it. They're not weird. The rest of the world is weird. Like their grandfather's weirder than they are.
Yeah.
They're just like these guys who are like reacting to these insane things that keep happening around them. They're not really going out of their way to instigate them. And Help is the same way. Ringo's just sitting there with his stone in his ring or whatever, right?
Do you think Help holds up as well as Hard Day's Night?
Well, it's not as good a picture, so
yeah.
It relative to, and it's not as good a picture because it is the same story, right?
Right.
And it isn't as fresh. And also, I think it's one of those situations where going to color didn't help.
That's right.
I'm really serious about that.
Yeah.
I think the fact that the Beatles, because remember, in those days, mostly what you saw on TV was in black and white.
That's right.
Many, many shows were not even shot in color. And none of the news was. And so it felt more like, it's meant to be a documentary, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the gag. I mean, it's meant to be a documentary in the sense that it's actually supposed to be documenting something that happened. It was something that was imagined, but
sure.
But it's supposed to look like a documentary and stuff. And Help evolves back one step closer to an Elvis movie and the color has a lot to do with that.
Right.
I thought that was, the rest of the movie making after A Hard Day's Night, first of all, is an impossible standard to meet almost. I mean, I don't even think that Richard Lester really got fully back there until maybe, what do you do, Superman 2 or Superman 3 with Richard Pryor?
That's right. Pryor. I'd forgotten he'd even done that. Yeah.
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
And it is, in some ways, the sequel to Help. It's not really a sequel to Hard Day's Night, but it is a version. It's like Richard Pryor, him and Richard Pryor conspiring to do Help, no matter, maybe a little help from Gene Hackman and Christopher Reeve. Yeah.
Now, wasn't the Three Musketeers series that Richard Lester did, wasn't that supposed to originally star the Beatles? Do you know anything about that?
It's a good idea whether they did it or not. Much better idea than, because what I'm thinking about is How I Won the War, which was John's anti-war movie, which Richard Lester directed also, I think.
Right, he did.
And that was a bit messy. Although as a teenager who was, looking the draft in the eye, it helped more than it hurt.
Sure.
And then the other one, I guess, that's in that sequence is Magical Mystery Tour, which I don't think anybody, even Paul, would defend anymore.
How many times have I sat down to try and watch that all the way through, and I can't get through it? I just can't.
You're not supposed to get through it because it's a TV show.
Okay.
You're supposed to get up and go make yourself a turkey sandwich and come back.
But you know what I will say about that?
Much more like the Rose Bowl parade than it is like a movie.
Right. But you know what? The videos, the song videos in that are really good because it's got the music. Whenever they stray from that.
And that batch of songs, I mean, I think clearly the Magical Mystery, it seems to me that the Magical Mystery Tour soundtrack record is the weakest album in their catalog. And there are some really, I mean, Blue Jay Way, I could, do without even knowing that existed. I'd feel better about things. But, Magical Mystery Tour itself and God Knows I Am the Walrus, those are great records.
Oh, sure.
I Am the Walrus is a great record.
Yeah.
And probably the one time that they truly did achieve something like a sequel to Strawberry Fields, which in a certain sense of ambition and just kind of successful artiness, might be their greatest record. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, I always maintain that their greatest records are. Well, actually, I think the greatest record is "She Loves You," and people say, "Well," and my thing, if anybody objects to that, I just say, "You think they got better, but all they really got was more complicated. They couldn't get any better." I mean, some of those Beatles, the early singles, and that's part of the Beatles' second album thing, because "She Loves You," that's the album "She Loves You's" on. It's not on any album in the UK until they put out Past Masters, I think, which is already the digital era.
Right.
Pretty much, or real close to it.
Yeah.
But you know, you can't make a better record than that. You can't really make a much better record than "I Call Your Name," which I'm reading Mark Lewison's book this morning, and I come across, John wrote that song in like 1958 or 59.
Wow.
And they kind of throw it away on an EP, and then Dexter accidentally resurrects it on that album. And that, I mean, "I Call Your Name," you go listen to that. That's a signature John Lennon tune. I mean, it feels to me like it's about Julia, but his mother,
right,
and her dying. But whatever the hell it's about, one of the signature moments of John Lennon's career. You know, "Money," their version of the Barrett Strong Motown song "Money," which is, you know, just out there. Beatles' second album had 3 Motown tracks on it. It had "Please Mr. Postman," "Money," and "You Really Got a Hold on Me," which was a very, very important record when I was a kid because I was such a Miracles fan. So, you know, somebody tries to trash them and they still succeed because the stuff that they're leaving off their albums in the UK is so great.
Yeah. I want to go back again. You've covered a few of the songs on the second album, but I'm just, because of your book, I'm just, it caused me to revisit that second album, which I sort of looked at as a throwaway, but it really is more than that. The thing that touched me the most about what you said about the second album is that it proved, after Meet the Beatles, that they were the real deal. There was no "Till There Was You." It was a rock and roll record.
There wasn't even any "And I Love Her,"
right?
Which was fine with me. No, you know, I was like, one of the things I had to realize about when I wrote about, because a friend of mine, Pete Fornatale Jr., actually, who's an editor, called me and said, "I want you to do a book about the Beatles for this little series I'm doing for Rodale Press." So I said, "Well, I would do it, but you'll never let me do the album I want to do." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "I want to do the Beatles' second album." He said, "You mean with the Beatles?" I said, "No, I want to do the Beatles' second album." And because Pete's a lot younger, he had to kind of be led by it. And everybody, my agent, thought it was crazy. Everybody thought it was crazy. I just kept saying, there's a story here. This is the story. Because I knew you got Dave Dexter. It was the first of the Dave Dexter albums. I knew you got this whole thing of that's when they begin to recover the material that's been licensed to the R&B labels. For me, I was 14, and one of the things I realized in the course of writing this book was, Jesus, Marsh, you're 14 years old, you're already an R&B snob. Because what I meant by not having "Till There Was You" on it, I don't know exactly what anybody else would mean by that, but not just that there weren't any sappy ballads on it. I like sappy ballads, and you could make a pretty good case that "You Really Got a Hold on Me" is a sappy ballad. But you could make a pretty good case that "She Loves You," if you slowed it down, would be one. But what it was it had the groove, it had that bluesy thing, it had the happy sad thing, you know, that's key to the blues, you know, where you know, you deal with your problems by dancing on them. All of that was on that record, and you didn't get distracted by show tunes and sappy and really sappy ballads that didn't have any beat to them. And you know, it was a matter for me. The second album was like I trusted them.
Right.
And from that moment on, I never distrusted them. You know, you could find them annoying, but you could not trust that they were doing. You know, I mean, they did some crazy stuff, and
Well, and as a teenager, I remember the second album specifically introducing me personally to all of this other great music. I mean, most of the album is cover songs.
Yeah, I guess it is. Well, I don't know most. You got the 3 Motown songs.
You got Chuck Berry, Roll Over Beethoven.
Right, so that's 4 out of 11 right there.
Devil in Her Heart, that's a cover.
Yep, which is almost a Motown song. It's a Detroit record that nobody, had heard at that point. Virtually nobody.
Long Tall Sally, who does it better than Little Richard? Maybe Paul McCartney.
The older I get, the more convinced I become of 2 things. That Little Richard was the greatest first-generation singer of rock and roll. Against the most formidable challenge ever there was. I mean, already placing him above Ray Charles makes me feel creepy. Or Sam Cooke. But in the end, he was more original. He was more of a rocker. He was what he was. But the other thing is that the greatest Little Richard student in history and was Paul McCartney. And that anybody who could possibly listen to Paul sing, not just, Long Tall Sally, which is brilliant, but, I saw her standing there. Which is the first album, and that's, the other side of that first American single, which, because, I'm getting senile, I can't think of the name of it.
I Want to Hold Your Hand.
I Want to Hold Your Hand. But I saw her standing there, which is kind of the lost song. It was just as big a hit. I saw her standing there. Is Mitch Ryder never sang Little Richard as good as that. And Little Richard sometimes didn't sing Little Richard as good as that. Pure Little Richard record. The whole screaming, the whole thing. And another thing about Mark Lewison's book is you find out that Paul, from when Richard made his first record at 55 or 56, when Paul was, 14 maybe,
right.
15, he's doing this already. He learns to do it right away. And he does it all the time. Put him anywhere near a piano, and he will stand on it and sing Tutti Frutti.
Right.
Or whatever, And so to me, if you could do that, and you could do Smokey, and you could do something that was as dark and bluesy as that, I keep coming back. It was funny because I wouldn't have said this before I wrote the book, but I keep coming back to I Call You Name, because I Call You Name sounds like it should be, in a certain spiritual sense, like it should be on Rubber Soul. It has the angst. And it sort of has that kind of folk blues feel too, that has something to do with Rubber Soul. So that one, but if you could do all of those things, and She Loves You, I have a thing like where there isn't any greatest rock and roll record except the one you just heard. But do you know what I mean by that? It's like if you listen to She Loves You, it's definitely the greatest rock and roll record you ever heard. If you listen to if you listen to James Brown singing Please, 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 then you'll be wrong about She Loves You, because you'll be right about Please, Please, Please. And that's how greatest records of all time work. But
right.
She Loves You's one. You can't do it better than that. I was talking about it with Derek Taylor, the Beatles publicist, one day, many, many years later, when the Anthology album came out. He thinks about it for a minute, and Derek, who is a very droll fellow, looks at me and he says, "It's a tribute to an English grammar school education. Reported dialogue."
Yeah.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about She Loves You isn't sung to a girl, it's sung to a guy.
Yeah. That's right.
It's sung to a guy.
Yeah.
Basically what they're saying is, screw this up, and I'm moving in. That's the message.
Right.
The message is, number one, she loves you, and number two, on the other hand, if you're not going to take advantage of that,
I'm there.
Right along.
Yeah, I'm there. Let me ask you: is the second album book still in print? Because I cannot tout that book enough. I think it's
something. I don't know what that even means anymore. It's easy to find.
Okay.
But better than that, and I didn't know when I did this the other. I was in the iTunes store the other day, and I was looking for something. I thought, well, I know. I found this guy in the Canadian Maritime provinces. New Brunswick and Newfoundland, and all over Nova Scotia, all over there to the right of the map, and east of Montreal by 300 miles and 400 miles and 500 miles. And the most famous rock musicians over there, his name is Dave Marsh.
Mm.
And so I went to look for his records, and I thought, well, I wonder if there's anything by me on here. And it turns out that which I never knew this until about a week ago today, there's an audiobook of this album.
Really?
Yeah.
Who wrote?
I wish they had let me do it because I could have done it better. But the guy did okay. It's really okay.
Wow.
And it's not. It's about $15, I think.
And that's on iTunes.
It's on iTunes. Yeah, I think it's only an iBook.
Wow.
I can find it on Kindle.
Well, I would suggest everyone.
I guess it wouldn't be an iBook if it was on Kindle. I couldn't find it on Audible or whatever. I think it's only an iBook, but it's pretty good.
Well, I think that I love your writing in general, as you know, but I think this is one of the greatest Beatle books ever written, personally, and I
think it's the best. I actually think it's probably just in terms of what it is, which is short.
Yes,
I've written more ambitious things, but this is
absolutely
this is the best book I wrote. It's the most fun. It's funnier than the Louie book in a way, and I'm very, very proud of that book.
You should be. It's all those things you just said. It's short. It's a quick read. It's fun to read, and you find out a lot about the way the Beatles records were released. And if you're young and all you know is the CDs, this is a great book to read. And as usual, we could go on for hours, Dave. And I do want to get you on the phone again here down the line and talk about all of the Bruce stuff that's going on. Because
you're Mike Stark. I'll do whatever you need me to do. I just tell you, I talked to Bruce on the air at Sirius on last Sunday night,
and that was an excellent interview, I must say.
Before the end, and that was where he my actual bounden duty was to get him to say yes, the tour is over.
Right.
But he went into some things, and we're still airing that, and I think the transcript will probably be at the Backstreets.com website.
Oh, great.
He went into some things about the band and how you run a 17-piece band and what it means to have that many options as a musician.
I thought his description of how he dealt with the sign request was...
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Was unbelievably informative to a fan who wonders how that comes together so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anybody out there who doesn't know, Bruce will take a sign out of the audience that either has on it the name of a song that they've never played before, or a song that they haven't played in so many years that nobody really actually remembers what the arrangement was, and he'll turn around, and you'll notice it if it takes 45 seconds. Sometimes he can do it in about 13.
I know. It's unbelievable.
And this is with a 17-piece band.
Right.
So essentially, they're always rearranging it. And he really paid tribute to other guys in the band other than the core band, which is Kurt Rahm, who leads the horn section. And Curtis, I'm going to say this wrong. I want to say Curtis Jones because I got a friend named Curtis Jones, but
right.
Curtis King,
right.
Who's now going to strangle me the next time he sees me. But anyway, Curtis King, who leads this incredible... Well, it looks like three voices up there because it's Curtis, it's the great Sidney Meisel, who people might know from the Stones tours or that 20 Feet from Stardom movie, or especially from the Luther Vandross tours, and then a woman that Bruce found down in Jersey named Michelle Moore. But also they got this hand percussionist, Everett Bradley, down there, and he actually is a great harmony singer.
Right.
He's the best doo-wop harmony singer of all of those guys, which actually used to fall to Clarence a lot.
Right.
And the one reason to mention Edward Bradley is he will be the band leader on Meredith Vieira's new daytime talk shows.
Oh, wow.
An all-girl band except for himself.
Wow. Fantastic.
Well, it's a quartet. But, or he told me it was going to be a quartet. We'll see what happens when they get on the air. But, you know, so he talks about how you communicate. And it's an interesting little thing to just think about, well, how do you communicate in your own life? You've got a bunch of different groups of people that you need to send a message, and they need to coordinate their activity. Something we're not very good at in this culture.
Right. And as a fellow radio guy, you put 4 or 5 people behind the microphone to discuss something, and you know how chaotic that can get alone.
Well, except if you do it together all the time.
That's right.
You work very, very hard to build some bonds where you can totally trust. You know, I did this with Bruce twice. I did it, this very thing that you're talking about in radio. I mean, I took the 4 people who are the most important voices on East Street Radio, me, Jim McDowell, who's also my producer for my other shows, Vinny Usurello, who's does all the day-to-day programming, and a woman who used to be an intern for us, who's now a up-and-coming Sirius voice and producer named Caroline McGarris. And I said to Bruce, I don't want to do the next interview about the new album with you. I want to do it with my friends that do the channel, and it'll be better for you because 2 of these three people are under 30, and you know Jim is just over 40, and you know this is what you need, and you need a woman in the mix, and we'll have a better time. Bruce trusted me, let me do that. And I said to everybody, the night before, I said to everybody, you know, look, just, you don't have to worry about this. You guys are all big enough fans. You all know what you can do. We got to trust each other. We didn't step on each other's line one time that night. And we did the same thing on Sunday night. All 4 of us were there, just how it worked out. And the same thing, you know, but that's people who talk, maybe not every day, but talk like a band talks.
That's right.
Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do next? How are we going to do it? How's it going to get better?
Well, and your first interview ended up a beautiful Tom Zimmy documentary.
Well, the one thing, I got to send you the one outtake, which is when Caroline tells Bruce that her grade school was St. Rosa Lima, which is the same nuns who taught him. And Bruce sort of has this long silence and says to Caroline, we have a deep, deep connection. Caroline says, the nuns still talk about you.
Oh, that's funny.
And I have just his look while that exchange is going on. I don't have the because the whole thing is from that angle.
Right.
But Tom, I got Tom to send it to me. I have to send it to you. It's very, very.
Oh, that is hilarious.
It's really seeing Bruce blush a little bit.
Right.
It's fun. But anyway, you know, one of the cool things about radio, and you were my mentor about this, long before I got involved doing my own shows so much, you and I did things where, and this is another example of it, where, you know, we just trust each other. We can throw things at each other, and good things happen out of it. It's always wonderful to talk to you. That's why I want to do more.
We're riffing, right?
That's it. You know, as much as I talk, I also listen. It's a miracle to me sometimes.
Well, Dave, I cherish our conversations. They are few. They are too few, but let's hope now that you've
them back up. You know,
we're going to try and make this happen a little bit more. And I appreciate every second I get to talk to you because you.
Hey, you know, we got a 40th anniversary of Born in the USA coming up.
Mm.
You know, that's a pretty big deal. We got the 40th anniversary of what I consider probably the first important folk rock record, which is not Mr. Tambourine Man. It's House of the Rising Sun by the Animals.
Mm.
I mean, 64 was a big year for a lot of different reasons. not Fade Away, the Rolling Stones version.
Well, you have just given a good preview of what is to come if I can corral you long enough to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't even get into, the Motown records that, the 64, probably one of the two greatest years for Motown, 64 and 65.
Sure.
For me.
Well, we will riff again. Dave, as always, I appreciate it.
Like we did last summer.
That's right. Check out Dave on SiriusXM. Kick Out the Jams. It's on way too early here on the West Coast.
Well, actually, there's a replay. Now, this is a crazy radio thing. My dad worked on a railroad, and on the railroad, trains leave at 11:59 and they leave at 12:01.
Right.
So you know what you're talking about. So you say, well, I leave at 12:01 a.m. on Tuesday. That's one thing. But if you say it's on Tuesday at midnight, well, is that Tuesday into Wednesday or Monday into Tuesday?
That's right. So when is the replay
People on
on?
radio have never figured this out.
Yeah.
So let me tell you, tune in at 11:59 on Monday night, and in 1 minute you will hear the replay. 11:59 East Coast time, which means it's on from 9 to 11.
Now that's reasonable.
East Coast.
Not
that's reasonable.
Not Sunday morning at 7. Although I usually am up by 7.
7. You're going to. Given that we start off with Kick Out the Jams, the uncensored version by the MC5,
that's right.
You'll feel like you need to go to church right after that.
That's exactly right. And now it's on demand throughout the day, so you can, if you have the on demand thing, you can back it up and listen at any time. All right, Dave. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it, and we will check in with you soon.
Keep on keeping on, my brother.